My wife baby trapped me. So my wife, 32 female, and I, 34 male, have been together for 8 years. We have a little girl, 5 female, and a baby boy, 2 male. I love both of them more than anything, and I feel like I have everything. A beautiful wife, 2 healthy kids, a great career, and a big house. The token American dream minus the dog. I'm allergic. When we talked about kids before, my wife always said she wanted 2. I only wanted 1. It would be easier and we'd have more money for vacations and stuff, but my wife maintained it's important for a child to have a sibling. I grew up with 4 and my wife with none, so I guess I understand where she's coming from. After our son and getting through the baby years and sleepless nights for the second time, I didn't want to ever go through that again. Both kids were very fussy and colicky, but when he was a year old, my wife began casually mentioning a third. I would laugh it off, but she finally sat me down and said we have to have a third. I said no. We agreed on 2, but she wanted 4, and 3 is the compromise. I refused and said I wanted 1 and we have 2. She got angry and called me selfish for taking away her dream of wanting a big family. A couple days later, she apologized and we had sex. I noticed her drive increase exponentially, but so did mine, and I was happy to engage her. She was on birth control, I had a condom. It was all good. Thinking back on it, I probably should have figured something was up, but I was barely handling 2 little kids and work on top of housework and yard work and everything. I came home from work one day while the kids were at their grandparents'. My wife had a huge smile on her face and she sat me down and showed me a positive pregnancy test, literally dancing in joy. My first thought was, oh shit. My wife noticed a less than happy expression on my face and started screaming at me. She berated me for not being supportive and this is a miracle from God and I should be grateful. I said I was sorry and hugged her and said that I was super excited for the baby. My wife was delighted and later that night she was calling all family and friends to happily tell them the news. When she was talking about the nursery and how we'll convert my office into a room, I started to get a little suspicious. Everything was so well thought out, and it seemed like she'd been planning this for a while. When she was asleep, I took the condoms out of the cupboard and ran them underwater. Holes. I nabbed her phone and saw she'd set a password. That was odd. Nevertheless, my wife has a terrible memory, so I tried her birthday and it opened. Further up were text messages from her best friend of my wife, complaining how I wouldn't come around. Her best friend suggested arrange an accident with a winky face. My wife agreed and said she was going to come off of birth control. It went on for a little while, ending with my wife saying yes, we were going to have a third. So I woke her up immediately and asked if this had really been a miracle. She got that deer in the headlights look and burst into tears. She wailed and then she got angry. Through tears she screamed, I had no right to go through her phone and it's her choice whether or not she wants to take birth control. The side effects are bad and she was sick. She also brought up if I really didn't want a third kid, I should have had a vasectomy. She told me to go sleep on the couch. I laughed out loud and said no, I'm sleeping here, you're leaving. So while wailing, she packed a bag and left it to her parents. When she called the next day, I told her I just need some time to myself. She said that's fine, but I need to come around for our child. I told her I wasn't sure if it would be our child and she cried more. It's been 2 weeks since then. Government recommends to stay at home, and I knew staying home by myself while also working with 2 kids would not be ideal and she would want to see her kids. So we're in the same house. She constantly keeps on stopping me and trying to get me excited for our kid and planning the nursery and names and how happy our kids will be to get a younger sibling. I've been ignoring her entirely. What do I do? Staying home with her is bad enough and I don't know if I should leave her over this. I don't trust her anymore. She's entirely betrayed it. I'm angry, but I have another child on the way.
Storytime about how my mother-in-law accused me of cheating on her son. Disclaimer, it's not my storytime, it's not on my Instagram. My evil mother-in-law is the worst of the worst. The moment I started dating her perfect little son, she would make judgmental comments on my body, and if I was ever in the kitchen cooking, she would be there to try to criticize everything that I would do. When my husband and I finally got pregnant, she pretended to be happy. I could see deep down inside she was hating the fact that I was pregnant. I think she always had the hope that he would leave me. But let me give you some background info on my husband. This man is lucky to be with me. Not only am I a 12, I am so kind and caring to him, and I have way too much patience for him. Whereas my mother-in-law thinks that he's the one lucky to be with me. First off, I make way more money than my husband, so I'm the one paying for most of the bills. But guess what? My husband asked me not to tell his mom about that because he'd be embarrassed. He also doesn't know how to cook or clean. And guess why? Because his mother did everything for him growing up. So I'm the one that has to cook, clean, and pay for the bills. A few months ago, I asked my husband for a divorce. He ran over to his mom's house and tried to get her to convince me not to. But guess what? His mom called me and told me that she'd convince him to give me a divorce. Part 2 is up. Storytime about how my mother-in-law accused me of cheating on her son. Disclaimer, it's not my storytime, it's sent me on Instagram. So instead of her trying to convince me not to leave him, she told me that she would convince my husband to break up with me. This was all for my benefit because I was the one that wanted a divorce. But 2 weeks later, I find out I'm pregnant. At the time, we were still living in the same house, but we weren't really talking. So I finally went up to him and told him that I was pregnant. He was so happy. You think he even gave me a hug or a kiss? No, he picked up the phone and called his mother right away. He called her on speaker and I could hear what she was saying. And as soon as he told her, she said, "It's probably not your kid." How could I have not seen this coming? At this point, she thought we were gonna get a divorce. So me having a kid was the worst case scenario for her. Right away, she told him to kick me out of the house that I pay for. That's when I grabbed the phone from him and I started telling her everything. First off, I told her that I paid for all the bills and that her son made only $200 a week from a stupid gaming thing and that he wasn't even bothering to look for another job. And then on top of paying for the bills, I still had to cook and clean. And I asked her, "Do you really think this is the kind of man I want to have a kid with?" She had no response. That's when she hung up the phone and told my husband to go over to her house. Part 3 is up. Storytime about how my mother-in-law accused me of cheating on her son. Disclaimer is now my storytime. I sent me on Instagram. When I broke the news to her that he didn't pay for any of the bills and that I was paying for the house, she literally lost her shit. My husband hung up the phone and told me that he would never speak to me again. God, if only that were true. Then he goes over to his mom's house and guess what? An hour later, he demands I go over to her house to apologize to his mother. I said that I would, but instead, I went over there and told her some more truths. I ended up telling her that her son told me not to tell her that he didn't make any money, and that the whole time he and I were together, she thought that he was paying for all the bills. Then I said, "Aren't you embarrassed that your son is like that?" That's when she told me the only way she would accept my child was with a paternity test. Am I supposed to do that with the baby in my belly? Finally, the baby was born and I was able to prove that it was his son. My husband wants us to stay together, but his mom keeps criticizing me. Every time she sees the kid, she says it doesn't look like my husband, even though I already proved that it was his. I think that I should get a divorce. I'm afraid my mother-in-law might do something to the baby. My husband thinks I'm just overreacting. What should I do?
Am I the asshole for telling my friend her boyfriend is not allowed at my wedding? I'm supposed to be getting married early October 2022. It's not going to be a big wedding or anything, but me and my fiance both have friends that we don't want to leave out. I have this friend, Amanda. We've known each other since high school and we aren't incredibly close by any means, but we are still somewhat good friends and hang out regularly, and I would like her to be there. My problem is, I just recently found out she is now dating and she wants to bring him as her plus one. My sister Lily and her ex Steve broke up almost 10 months ago because she found out he was cheating. She was heartbroken, and I know along with that, she still has a lot of resentment for him and doesn't even like hearing his name. He was a shit boyfriend, so my family has no problem with him no longer being in our lives. 8 months ago, Amanda told me she started talking to someone and she really liked him and everything. She wouldn't tell me who, not even his name, because she said she didn't want to share anything about him till it got more serious. I didn't really understand the secrecy, but didn't force her to tell me anything and just let her know I was happy for her and hope it all worked out. But last week, she told me she was dating Steve. They had gotten more serious and she wanted to make their relationship public to the people that they care about. She also said she knew how much I disliked him and what he had done to my sister, and I hoped I would try to understand their love and be happy for her and try to see him in a different light. I was a little shocked at first, since I didn't really expect her to be with a guy like him, and she knew what kind of a person and boyfriend he was. But it isn't my place, and I told her that I'm happy she's happy, and that was that. Well, 2 days later, we are texting about the wedding and everything, and she mentions Steve being her plus one. I did not want him there, not only because I know my sister, who's my maid of honor, doesn't want him there, but also because I don't like him and neither does my fiance. I immediately told her that Steve was not invited to the wedding. She was confused, and I explained to her that I was sorry and I'm happy for her, but I didn't want him there. At first, she thought it was just because my sister would be there, and kept saying that they wouldn't even be near each other and it would be fine. But then I explained that with everything that happened, we didn't want him there. I said sorry again, but she kept saying how I don't want her to be happy, how I just want her to live in the past, how I want to punish her for finding love, stuff like that. None of that is true, and I tried to tell her that, but she stopped responding. So now I'm left feeling like a complete asshole, and I don't know if I should just let Steve come or not.
I'm at Asla for leaving my friend's dog at a shelter after she abandoned him at my home. I have a friend who's 32 and asked me to dog sit her poodle for 2 weeks while she was on vacation. I've had some rough patches with my friend before, but she paid me beforehand to take care of the dog. And my house is big enough, so I agreed. I really like dogs and have had many throughout the years, but I really hated this dog. They peed everywhere, was destructive, and picked up fights with my dog, and felt entitled to my food while having a bowl of untouched, and then even shitted on my bed. After 2 weeks, I called my friend expecting her to be back in town and come get the little monster back. She never answered, no text, no call, no social media, nothing. And then she blocked me on social media. I waited for her to appear at my front door, but that never happened, and I even called her husband and he ghosted me as well. After 10 days, I had enough and went to a shelter, dropped the dog off, and finally had peace back at home. A week later, my friend called me saying that she's coming back for the dog. I blew up her asking where the hell she was, and I got tired of waiting, so I dropped the dog off at a shelter, and she started fighting with me over the phone, saying that's unfair. I put her dog in danger, and I should just waited longer. I gave her the address of the shelter. I'm at the asshole.